Brad and Dan talk shite.
Good day, dear listener. Welcome to the show. I am Dan, and with me, as always, is man of the people, hero of the establishment, and godlike creature to the God-fearing many, Brad. Now, I'm afraid we have to start today's podcast on a serious note. It is with a very heavy heart that I have to say this, but it is an important discussion that simply needs to be had. What do all these people have in common? Bill and Monica, John F. Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe, and Boris Johnson and each of his ex-wives with each of his next wives. Yes, dear listener, all of the above were cheaters, but in their circumstances, the infidelity was a physical and, in the case of Boris Johnson, nauseating deception. An assault on trust via the medium of intertwined genitalia. But what if it is an emotional dishonesty that you are a victim of? Is that not so much worse? Well, perhaps we have the perfect man to ask with us. Brad, it's time to be honest. It's time to lay our cards on the table. This week, it was brought to my attention that you, sir, have been podcasting with another. Anything to say in your defense?
Not really, man. Everyone likes me. As I said before in the pre-ramble, I'm a bit of a hot community right now. Well, it's okay. You'll get your love for me back. You can't keep away from me.
Let's start the healing process. Brad, how is your shit? How are you doing?
My shit
down in Groovetown.
My shit's really good, Dan. Last week we found out that we're having a baby girl, and that's kind of thank you. That's kind of taken up a lot of the conversation since the last recording. Talking to family and all that, and already buying clothes and looking for all the doodads. As one might.
Yeah,
but
and creating the house to have no sharp or hard edges.
Well, that's
no plug sockets within reach. And
yes. Well, the fun thing is we're actually moving when my wife is 7 months pregnant across provinces. So it's going to be
tip-top planning. Well done.
Yep. The move was planned like 2 years ago. The baby was not. Well,
so cross provinces, obviously, I live on a small island where you can travel everywhere within about 8 hours. What distance are you talking for your cross province?
Between here and Edmonton is I think it's a 12-hour drive.
Okay. So
it's not the worst, but like, again, it is our next, like, it's our neighboring province, and it's still 12 hours away.
Pretty much from the very southerly tip of England to the highest point of Scotland. So
oh, damn. Whenever we talk about this stuff, it's depressing.
Yeah.
I wish we could drive around our country like that. It would be swell.
Yeah. We are kind of lucky like that. But hey ho.
But anyways, that has been a majority of what I've been going through outside of Gaming for Guts Canada prep, which I'll get into in another episode.
Infidelity with other content creators. Yeah.
Hey, what can I say? I've got stories to tell, and people want to hear them.
Go on. Why don't you plug it? Why don't you tell the good people what they're missing out on? Because as I read it, it was basically your sex life exposed in an interview.
So I've been taking part in I guess almost a long form interview. I took part in part 1 last fall. I think it was after my surgery and it was I was a dad I want to be an IBD dad, so we were trying. This is part 2 of the article where I am now an IBD dad to be, and it's a lot of talk about what we see the future being and stuff like that.
They're gonna fast forward to you being an actual dad,
yes,
dead behind the eyes and about 25 years older.
Well, we do have another one planned for the 1 year mark where we're going to encapsulate the 1 year and how it went and all of that jazz. It'll be fun. It's good content. We had the conversation that there's a lot of talk with IBD mums, and there's just there's a lot more involved. They go through so much through pregnancy with kids. So it's so understandable, but there isn't a lot of dad content.
Women do kind of do the heavy working heavy lifting when it comes to pregnancy.
Well,
I think that's
that, but it also puts them at high risk. Like IBD pregnancies are high risk, so there's so much more involved.
Pregnancy is pretty much high risk anyway. The amount of things you can develop through pregnancy is ridiculous.
It is.
I looked after a few women who've had gestational issues and ended up in hospital with cardiac problems and kidney problems and all sorts. So.
One of the I was going to say one of the funny things, but not funny, is for the longest time I required constant iron infusions to keep me up on my feet. And most of the time, I'm like one of the only dudes in there, and it's a lot of pregnant ladies because their iron levels tend to tank, so they are in there for iron. So it's always been one thing I've noticed in my experience.
Essentially, because they've got a little parasite sucking all the goodness out of them. Yep. So, and that continues long into.
As I said last time, life. It works in positives and negatives. My wife had a dairy intolerance, couldn't have dairy. Baby is taking dairy and she's going to town. Like any dairy, all dairy. But anyways, I digress. All the time. Dan, how's your shit?
Yeah, okay. It's a bit of a crappy day today. I've had quite a bit of pain today, which is the first time in a long time I've had any pain in my stomach, but nothing, it was not intolerable. Still got on with my day.
This is what, a week and a half or 2 weeks out from your last infusion?
Yes.
Okay.
Something like that, yeah.
Keep track of it. Like, keep track of what you're feeling.
Well, I could look at a calendar, but I think now's not the time or place.
No.
I had the joy of another blood test today, so that was another hour spent at the hospital.
Well, compared to the ones you've talked about before, that's short.
Yeah, and she hit the vein first time, which is progress.
Lucky boy.
And then the big news is I am currently 5 days, as we record, 5 days away from hitting the big 4-0. So I'm doing everything a man should do in his late 30s, like crack, heroin, hookers.
Get it all done.
Getting it all out of the system before I finally reach adulthood.
You'll never reach adulthood.
My lovely lady wife is taking me to Prague this weekend, which will be nice.
Okay, how far is Prague?
It's in the Czech Republic. So
are you flying or
2.5 hours? Well, yeah, we're not driving. Okay. It's about 2.5 hour flight.
Okay.
So yeah.
Still shorter than going across country on a plane here.
Yeah, and never been there before. So
that sounds beautiful.
It's a rare country in Europe I haven't visited.
Take a lot of pictures.
So my wife is obsessed with pictures.
Okay.
We literally have about 37 before we get off the plane.
The architecture there is gorgeous.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it. And it's the first time we've had a weekend away together in 16 years.
Oh, damn. I guess that's what I have coming.
Nice. Yeah. Kids don't allow you to do these things. So, yeah, that's all good. So, a mixed bag today, but on the whole, feeling very old and broken. Anyway, let's get to today's guests. So today we have the pleasure of being joined by Tom. Now, Tom, as you're actually in the room, well, not in the room, but you're on the chat with us now, as opposed to bringing you in a little later for the interview, I will start with the same question I just fired at Brad. How's your shit, dude?
I don't really know where to start, to be honest. It's not too bad in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
Compared to where I have been in the last few months. So just for the listeners that won't know my backstory, I'm a week and a half out of hospital after having 2 fractured vertebrae, which still not sure how I managed to do it.
I swear, man, it's your wife kicking you for snoring.
Well, unfortunately, you've got it coming, Dan, because I turned 40 2 weeks ago, so it must be an age thing.
So that was your 40th birthday present, two cracked vertebrae.
Literally spent my 40th birthday in the hospice with a cake with the nurses.
Oh.
They did let me out for day release, so I went out and got a meal. So
That's
I can't
good.
complain too much.
That's good.
But going back to the shit part of it, obviously, the cancer side of things that's going on with me, and the fact that I've got a stoma, I've actually had my stoma 10 months now, and 2 nights out of the last 3, it's blown off. And I've never had any issues with it in all the time I've had it since I've been on all these extra strong painkillers, and they're just knocking me out on a night. I'm not waking up at all.
Right.
And it's blowing off. So I'm setting an alarm for 2 o'clock this morning just to make sure I get up.
Now, I don't want to interject too much, but have you used any? Do you have a 1-piece or a 2-piece?
It's just a 1-piece.
Okay, so I've was
a
1
drainable
piece.
1-piece I have.
Same here. Well, no, I just adapted to a 2-piece, and one of the things they told me, which is handy, is having switching to what's, I guess, a night bag that's like bigger.
Yep.
Have you ever thought about doing anything like that?
I haven't up until the last week. 'Cause like I say, for 10 months, it's been easy going, really. I couldn't speak highly enough about what's happened with me and my recovery and everything. It's made everything so easy. But I think it's just the fact that I'm sleeping so deeply
Yes.
on all these painkillers.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Realizing that it's full, and then as I'm bending and twitching and moving, it's just too full.
Yeah. That's
Fortunately,
interesting to
I
know.
sleep with a vest on.
Ah.
Which I have only just started doing recently, thankfully.
Okay.
Makes tidying up a lot quicker.
I've contemplated sleeping with my my belt on, but I don't sleep well, so I generally can wake up easy.
Just explain to anyone who doesn't have a stoma what your belt is. It's not like you're just sleeping in a leather belt and just that.
There are many varieties.
Now there's an image.
There is an image, and there we go back to his kinky little podcast about him trying for babies. So
there you go.
So
we won't get into
just
that.
Explain what the belt is.
Well, I use a stealth belt. There are many companies that make different varieties. It's essentially it's a minor compression belt. It's not like most of the like medically compression belts. It is both for minor stability compression. A lot of it is for how you feel. Like if people want to hide their bags and stuff, it's really good for that. It's good for intimacy. I use it a lot for anything that requires like any exercise or something where I'm going to be moving my body in ways that might not be the best for Sean. That's my stoma's name.
That's masturbation.
But the one interesting thing is I switched to a 2-piece, and up until then, there are actually horizontal and vertical bags. Belts. I did not know this when I got mine. So I turn my my bag vertical or horizontal. Sorry, horizontal. Yeah. But it can cause pancaking, and it's the very first time I have dealt with that was after doing the Fan Expo on the weekend. Came home and I had that happening. But then the other bonus of a 2-piece is my wife's like, you could just take the bag off and put another one on. Literally was just popped it off, cleaned Sean up, popped another bag right on top. Didn't have to take the plate off at all. Really nice.
I love that you name your stoma. Why don't more people name their assholes? It begs the question. So anyway, Tom, getting back to
I think when you're in our situation, I think you end up doing it just because you feel you ought to do. I ended up naming mine Boris because it was obviously during all the lockdowns. And
I was about to ask, is it?
I just had a bag full of shit in front of me all the time, so I thought it's very appropriate.
Yep.
I like that.
Let's steer clear of the politics because of the lying twat. Anyway, so Tom, you mentioned it very briefly there, but the reason we wanted to chat with you specifically, obviously, we make a podcast about chronic illness. First episode was our Christmas episode, which was all about people talking to me about living with IBD as I was newly diagnosed. Then we had Sean on, who was fabulous, talking about recovery from surgery after stoma surgery. Then we've had Faye on, who deals with fibromyalgia. And then we had Michael last week, who was it's not actually gone out yet, but
Type 1.
as we record, with type 1 diabetes. So the reason we wanted to talk to you and the story you've got is quite fascinating. It's well, you tell the story, but basically you're living with cancer.
I am, yeah. I am living with stage 4 cancer, so it's incurable. It's inoperable at its current state, so I'm effectively just working with whatever treatments are available to keep me going for as long as possible.
Right.
And I have known that since very early on, even before the doctors officially told me. I think I had an inkling it was pretty bad. I'd had no real issues up until probably 2.5, 3 years ago. Maybe once or twice when I was a lot younger, went out and had a heavy night. The night after, I might have had a little bit of bleeding or something like that, but I'd never had any issues with my bowels, particularly just that they weren't regular. It wasn't, I wouldn't go once a day, I wouldn't go twice a day. Going twice a day, one day, and then 7 times next day, 3 times, anything like that wasn't a normal occurrence for me. So
Right.
I never really had anything that really stood out. And then sort of 2 or 3 years ago, I started having a lot of back pain, lower abdomen pain, groin pain, hip pain, and the doctors just couldn't figure out what was going on. They thought it was just a lower back injury initially because that's where most of the pain was radiating. So I
Right.
kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and then after about a year and a half, 2 years, I had a severe bleed. I instantly went to the doctors because I thought, no, this is definitely not right with everything else that's going on. They wanted to send me for IBD, IBS, Crohn's colitis, all of that type of testing. And I specifically pushed at the time and said, well, why not test everything while I'm here?
Right.
And I was effectively told, you're too young to have cancer. You're not in the age bracket of somebody who gets bowel cancer. So it'd be pointless testing it. Obviously, at this point, I was pretty worried about what were going on, so I pushed for it. So they did end up testing me. I can't remember what the scoring system was, but I know that the test was called a fit test, and I think that's the one over here that generally people get sent out at something like 55, 60, 65 as a general screening mechanism. So obviously, as you can imagine, at 39, I'm way ahead of all of that.
Right.
And it said something like, if you score over 20 on this marker, then there's a chance that you've got cancer. And mine was something like 750. So at that point, I already had a slight inkling that things weren't going to be just IBD.
There's a slight giveaway there.
Yeah. So pretty much straight away, I knew it wasn't going to be good news. Then got referred to a colonoscopy, CT scans, all the rest of it straight off the back of that down the cancer pathway here. And I was told March last year I had a colonoscopy, and the consultant who took the colonoscopy literally told me there and then. He took something like 21, 22 biopsies while he was in there, and still had only got a third of the way around my bowel because the tumour was so large he couldn't get past the main tumour.
Right.
So he just told us there and then it's 99.9% likely this is cancer. We don't know to what degree yet. So literally had the camera up my arse and then was told 10 minutes later that I've got cancer. So a bit of fun
Not a
Saturday
good day.
morning, that.
No.
Yeah.
No, and then travelling back home and all the gas escaping and all that just adds to it, as you can probably both attest from. So yeah, it was a bit of a strange day that day. And then from then onwards, we've just sort of, it's just snowballed. And from my point of view, and I think talking to most people who are in and dealing with cancer, specifically patients as well, I think families get wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
But from a different angle completely. But from patients, you just sort of get subsumed by it, and all you're looking at is your next appointment, your next treatment, your next something, your next this, your next that. So this last 10 months feels to me like it's been about 3 months. It seems to have gone like a whirlwind. I've had something like 13 or 14 chemo sessions.
Jeez.
Over the last year, because I had it pretty intense to start with, and it's just a case of get through one, get through the recovery from that one, and then you're back into looking at the next one to then look at recovery. So you kind of lose a lot of what's going on in your life around you because you're just so focused on getting
Yeah.
through the treatment, hoping for the best. I've had some good and some bad news in my treatment, which I think is the case for everyone. The first lot of chemo didn't really do any good, so they moved me on to a second phase of chemo, which is more targeted at my specific genetic mutations and concerns, which did seem to be working quite well. But as I was in the hospice, when I've had the issues with my back, they've done some further tests and seen that the cancer's now spread to my brain as well as my bowel. So just waiting on some results on that really now to see if it's something that could be treated, because they're talking about radiotherapy and all other types of treatments that may be possible.
Right.
Going from there really, because they keep saying that in general I'm doing all right, but then obviously it's spreading slightly and slowly in certain places. But I think if you were to look at a general bowel cancer patient and then put my charts at the side of them, you'd think I was an alien, because
Oh.
pretty much everything that's happened to me shouldn't happen. So I had it obviously in my bowel to start with, is where my main cancer originated and started. I've got 2 big tumours. It's then spread into the bone in one of my legs, which doesn't happen. It doesn't go to bones from bowel cancer
Oh.
usually. It normally goes to your liver or your lungs or one of your central organs because it flows away with the blood. And it's even rarer that it goes to your brain, especially if it's not gone into any other organ. So it's one of the things where you're just always second guessing. Like if you're in my position, just any little ache, creak, anything, you're just second guessing, thinking, well, it shouldn't do this, but they've been saying that since day one, and everything they've said it shouldn't do, it is doing. So
Mhm.
you end up just thinking the worst quite often. But that's not really my mindset. You can't help thinking the worst sometimes, but and I'm sure Dan, from speaking to you a couple of times and messaging, I'm sure you'll probably be able to understand this. Like, I've always been quite a positive person anyway. You know, when I was a kid, I've always tried to look on the bright side of things, and I just think having a positive mentality makes a massive difference in how you
Yes.
get through things, and it definitely has with me. Whether it's made a physical difference, I don't know, but just on me personally, it's made a massive difference.
Yeah.
I mean, a huge part of why I wanted you to come on the podcast is because of that positivity. Because I know you have that positive outlook, which makes or it strikes me that it would make conversations like this easier to have. To have frank conversations, because you're grounded in positivity, like you say, most of the time. You know, everyone has dark days. You know, some more than others.
You can only handle so much at times, and
Absolutely.
you'll tend to have a low moment, but the good part is when you, like, if you're able to bounce back out of it.
Yeah, and I won't sugarcoat it either. You know, when I was in the hospice and they told me that it spread to my brain, I was devastated.
Oh,
For a brief
understandable.
period, I just thought, you just think, Jesus Christ, what else have I got to deal with now? I've just recovered from a broken back that I don't even know how I did. I'm just about getting on my feet, and then I have a week where I've got splitting headaches, and then they tell you that, and you just think, is someone really trying to test me here, or is it just really bad luck?
Not sure how much more they can throw at you in terms of testing you, to be honest. I think you've been tested to the nth degree. So just to go back, I'm interested in your diagnosis day. So you'd been pretty unwell in terms of your bowel. You'd been bleeding a lot from your bowel. So I imagine you had an inkling that there was something seriously wrong.
Yeah.
But just talk us through kind of where you're at mentally when you get given that diagnosis. I know it sounds like a bit of a daft question, but I'm just intrigued to.
No, it's not, because I've said this to a few people, and it is really strange, because I'm not a religious person. I'm not someone who believes in fate or anything like that. But it was almost as if I knew what was coming. So the doctors had said things about Crohn's and colitis and testing for those, and they were trying to eliminate those. Which, in the position that I was in, I kind of felt like I was further on than that, or if I
Yeah.
was going down one of those routes, I was already well advanced and
Mhm.
probably would be needing some kind of surgery or hospital treatment because I was getting a lot of stomach cramps. I could barely move, obviously bleeding and all of that together. I was on the toilet most of the day for like 4 or 5 days. So I knew at that point something was pretty wrong. And effectively it was because my bowel had just completely blocked because the tumour had closed my bowel off essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
So the night before the colonoscopy, which was when I was properly told about the diagnosis, obviously, you do all your bowel prep, which is fun. I think that's the worst part of the whole thing.
I would
Colonoscopies are
describe-
easy, man. It's the prep.
Yeah. The prep
The
is.
prep is the worst thing I've ever done.
Yep. It
Yeah,
sucks.
It's
I
fucking
had a fun
horrible. I
night.
don't think there's another way to put it. I think it's
No.
just
No.
absolutely. I mean, so I've only had to do the prep once, and it was when I was acutely unwell with it. So you probably went through this. Well, you've probably all been through exactly the same thing, but I was already exhausted, already in a
Dude.
fuck ton of pain, and then they give you this horrible stuff to try and drink, which then just amplifies the pain.
I've got a
No end.
question. You guys have a medical system that's closer to ours than the US. And you guys are going through a lot of medical, like your system's also kind of like crumbling like ours.
Yeah.
What now, you guys are both, I don't know how many colonoscopies. Dan's only had the one. Tom, have you had more than one? 2, Dan, okay.
Yeah, I've had 3.
Okay, so what is the time that you were given? Usually it's a 24-hour bracket. You can't eat for 24 hours and they get you in. What is the maximum time you've had to go through with that?
Mine were close to 36 hours, but that
Okay, you're
was
closer to
delayed
me.
slightly.
Maybe my first one I'd not eaten in about 2 weeks, so I was malnourished and not eating anyway. So they didn't really bring that up.
That's a lot of me at the times, but I only bring it up because our system got so bad that they don't adjust the instructions. So it's like whatever time your appointment is, it just says the same thing. So my max time that I've gone for was, I think, 48 hours before they, because it was an end of the day thing and they wanted me to start at the start of the prior day. And I was just like, oh, yeah. Also in the same situation as you, malnourished, wasn't already keeping things down.
Yeah, not a fun experience.
But
No,
continue.
I think my first one was similar to that. That the timings did seem to be for another time of an appointment, but they just said, you're coming in afternoon, so follow this. I think that's a standard approach these days.
Interesting.
So going back to the diagnosis day, do you think it actually made it easier on yourself because you were prepared for the worst? Like you said, you already kind of figured that there was something seriously wrong. So was it almost like the doctors saying it was cancer? You were just like, fucking knew it. It's almost like tell me something I don't know. Right.
As much as it sounds daft, that is pretty much it.
No, it doesn't sound daft at all. I mean, when I was
obviously
ill, I was
on the
convinced it was
colonoscopy.
cancer.
Yeah, well, I think naturally everybody fears the worst anyway, don't we?
Yeah, I think that's how we're programmed.
I think that's part of it. So it sort of gets you ready for the shock to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But because in the colonoscopy, I could see the screen. I could see what he was doing. I could see him taking all these biopsies and I could see these masses. I didn't know what they were, but I could see that they didn't look like the rest of the bowel material around it. So I knew something was there that probably shouldn't be there, especially when he started hacking massive chunks out of it and it was bleeding everywhere.
Was he describing what was going on while he was doing it?
No, they didn't talk about it.
Were you
all.
Were you under sedation?
I wasn't sedated fully, but I did have some relaxants.
Okay. So you were fully aware,
but able to watch.
Okay. I go through that, so I was curious.
Painful. Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't painful or anything.
Well, that's
because
good.
of all the relaxants, but it was a very strange situation to be in.
Yes.
Watching them do all of that, knowing that's inside you.
It is, isn't it?
There's two ways of looking at this. So part of what I do for a living, how to describe it. So you can see the procedure we're doing on the X-ray on the X-ray monitor, and sometimes we've had patients who will want you to talk through everything you're doing because they can see it. They want a deep dive into what's going on, find it absolutely fascinating. Other patients are absolutely horrified at the idea.
Yeah.
Now, for me, with the colonoscopy, I mean, the first time I was as high as Keith Richards circa 1968. I was off my tits on opiates, so I don't think I can really comment on that one too much. Second one, and this might be because I actually knew the doctor who was carrying out the procedure, which was in no way, shape, or form awkward. But we're going to get him on a future podcast, so we can talk about my asshole a bit more depth on that one. But I felt comfortable enough to ask him, what's that? What's that? Is that normal? Is that a bit of disease and what have you? I think it'd be good for doctors, and I know some doctors who do this, is to actually ask the patient before the test, do you want me to talk you through it? Because you'll be able to see the screen. Do you want me to chat through it? If you don't want me to say anything, I won't say anything. But if you want me to,
I think most of them expect you to be pretty knocked out. I know my GIs have been good.
Depends what drug they give you.
Yes.
So there was a guy on Twitter the other day who said that he'd taken a photo on his phone when he'd been in for his colonoscopy and absolutely can't remember taking it, and it's really bizarre, it's really strange. And I didn't respond because I couldn't be bothered with the back and forth, to be honest. But one of the drugs he had has an effect on you where you just don't remember. You're fully conscious and you can be having a conversation and you just will not remember it. Once looked after a lady who had a little cocktail of drugs and basically began to talk about all the things she would like to do to the doctor carrying out the procedure if she met him on a night out. Now, thankfully for her, one of the drugs that she had taken had this forgetful trait, so she didn't remember the conversation at all. But I've never seen a doctor so embarrassed in my life. I mean, she was getting into the nitty gritty of what she would do with her tongue.
That's
But I
hilarious.
think we got slightly off topic.
Just a little bit, but it's fine.
Yeah. So I'm interested now. So we've talked about diagnosis day. Was your wife with you when they gave you the diagnosis?
She was, which was another part of the process of me thinking, well, I know something bad's coming because I'd had the colonoscopy. And then they said, has your wife or girlfriend brought you today? Because obviously I was having the sedation. So if you have the sedation, they want someone to drive you anyway because it can affect your ability. So they'd said, can you call her in so we can have a chat? Which as soon as they call in,
Right.
It's a pretty big
your wife
red
partner,
flag.
you think, it's not going to be plain sailing from here onwards. So, she came, and then obviously when I rung her and the phone rang at her end, I think she knew straight away as well what that meant.
Right.
So before we'd even been told anything, I think both of us knew what were coming. Not to the extent that it's ended up being. We were obviously hoping that it'd be at the other end of the scale, but unfortunately, that's just the way things go sometimes.
So, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I know you've got a young family. How did you and your wife decide to go about telling your kids what was going on? Because obviously you're in hospital. I know, is it a 2 and a 7-year-old you've got? So
That's right, yeah.
one's too young to really understand, but one's of an age where they know something's changed. So how did you handle how you communicated that?
It's not been the easiest thing to deal with. I think
No, that's
if he was
given.
a couple of years younger, we'd probably get away with pussyfooting around it a little bit more.
Yeah.
If he was a little bit older, we could probably be really straight up with him. So we're sort of on a bit of a tightrope at the moment. Obviously, after my diagnosis, I was in hospital within 2 weeks to have the operation to have my ileostomy. So he literally went to school one day and came home and I wasn't there because my bowel had just stopped working. So I got rushed in on that day. So we had to have a conversation with him to say,
Right.
Daddy's not been, Daddy's not been very well. He's not been at work for the last few weeks. That his stomach's now really played up. He's going to have an operation. There's something else going on. So we had a bit of a conversation around the stoma part of it to get him at least to understand what was happening there. And then we tried to sort of get him to talk to us a bit more, like sort of almost preempt a conversation to see what questions he's thinking and asking. And we dropped cancer into the conversation a fair few times just to see if he reacted to it, if he knew what it was, because obviously it's on the telly all the time and there's adverts for fundraising or different charities, so you never know what they're picking up on. So we had a bit of a chat around what cancer is in its generality, and not too much detail. So where we're currently at with the eldest, obviously, like you say, the youngest two, he doesn't know what's going on. He still sees me as a bouncy castle and wants to jump and run and don't realise my back doesn't work anymore. So now where we are with the eldest one, it's just a case of trying to keep that dialogue open with him so he feels comfortable asking us things.
Right. That's good.
We are going to have to sit him down at some point in the not too distant future and just say, the cancer that was in my bowel has now spread to other areas, which means I'm probably going to get more sick. I'm going to be more poorly. I'm not going to be able to do things, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to have to try new medication and just sort of lay it out in quite a straightforward but simple way. Like if you ever complicate it for the kids, they'll just ask loads more questions, get more confused, more upset.
Right.
Leaving them with the questions to come back to us is the best that we've found. If he asks us questions, I think he feels like he's knowing what he needs to know, not what we want to tell him.
Right. That's fair.
That sounds like it sounds like the right way to do it. I know there's no right or wrong way, but it's certainly a way I would like to think I would do the same. I mean, obviously, you don't know.
We have had quite a lot of help from Macmillan nurses.
Oh, that's good.
They've been heavily involved with us. Probably after about 3 or 4 months post diagnosis, it was quite quiet to start with while I was just getting into treatment, but I've got everyone involved in me because obviously it's stage 4. I've got palliative care doctors involved, nurses. I've got Macmillan. I've got community nurses who come out regularly. So there's always someone who we can ask questions of, and if they don't know, they can pass us on to other people who have been really helpful. And Macmillan over here, they do a lot of really handy booklets. That you can just pick up. When you're on cancer ward, if you're having treatment, there's always loads of little booklets, and a lot of it's about practicalities, financial difficulties, all that type of stuff. But there is some about just like talking to children, and some of them are like easy read magazines almost, that it's just pictures with a few words saying keep it simple and stuff. So they've been really useful and helpful for us.
Very good. So, kind of the flip side to that coin. How have you found people have changed in the way they talk to you since learning about the diagnosis? Has there been any change, or
significantly? I would say is the main word. Even like my closest friends struggle to know what to say to me now. They want to know how I am, but then they don't really want to ask how I am because they know there's all this crap going on. But to be honest, I think, and it is true what people say, you do see the genuine worth of your friends when you're in time to struggle, because there has been some of them who have come out of woodwork who I would never have expected to have put so much time and effort into making sure I'm all right. And likewise, there's probably a couple who I thought would be there who've just gone quiet because they just literally don't know what to say. And I think it's more awkward for them than me. They don't want to upset me, and likewise, they don't want me to upset them, I don't think.
And they don't know how to handle it.
No, and that's it. And you'll see from me talking today, I'm pretty good at talking about it. I'm quite open about it. I won't sugarcoat anything. if you ask me a question about it, I'll tell you the truth, what's and all. And if it's a load of crap, it's a load of crap. If it's good news, it's good news.
Yeah.
So I think some people struggle with that bit as well. They just
I
they
think
don't
I think
like
you're right.
some people really struggle with the gravity of it. So one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard around chronic illness, and I guess it'll be the same for you, is don't ask how I'm doing, ask how I'm doing today.
Yeah.
Because you can have good days, you can have bad days, and sometimes the wider picture is bleak. So if you ask for the how am I doing in the wider sense, then I'm not doing great. But then on a day, if you boil it down to a day-to-day thing, it becomes a little easier to swallow on both parts, I think. So as the patient in a bed when your parents come to see you, if they say how are you doing today rather than how you're doing, is a slightly easier question to answer. And I also think if you're in the position of one of your friends who feels so uncomfortable and doesn't know what to say, which is what they might just think you're a cock, but we suspect they're struggling
Probably
with
likely.
we suspect they're struggling with the idea of talking to you. It might make it a little easier on them as well if it's just how you're doing today, because it makes it a smaller answer than maybe they're prepared to go into.
Yeah. I would agree with that, and I would like, for context, in sort of my situation when I was first diagnosed. Obviously, the first thing that my wife Charlotte said was, "How long have we got?" It's the first thing that crops up, isn't it, when you get told that it's essentially a terminal disease. And no one has ever been able to give us even a remote answer guess. It's we will let you know when we need to let you know that things are serious. Obviously, I'm the type of person who goes away and does a lot of my own research and reading, and I like to understand what's going on. So I'd looked it up and everything with all my quirks and conditions and all the other add-on bits.
Individuality.
It was saying that realistically only 10% of people with my diagnosis live for more than 2 years, which when you read that on paper, you just think, fucking hell, that's not good.
Yeah.
So going back to your point about how you're doing today, if someone was just to ask me how I'm doing, I'd be like, well, I'm nearly 12 months into my 2-year sentence.
Right.
Whereas if you look at it on a day-to-day basis, I could say, well, my back aches a bit, but I haven't blown a bag off today, so it's a pretty good day.
And also it depends on your mood at the time of being questioned, I guess.
100%.
Because if you're in a good place, you'll just be like, yeah, I'm doing okay. If you're in a bad place, you're tempted to just turn around and say, well, I'm fucking dying. What more do you want me to say?
Yeah, where do you expect me to be right now?
Yeah,
Right.
How chirpy do you want me to feel given what I'm carrying at the minute? So yeah, that's really interesting.
Well, one of the things I found, I'm obviously doing a lot better than I was. During a lot of the difficult times, I like to tell people that it's one of the helpful things is focusing on the little things, like things that you wouldn't really think about day to day, but in a condition where you're just going through so much, those little things can actually be like bright lights shining through the dark.
When you say little things, are we back to your furious masturbation again?
Well, it helps every now and then.
I think you're right there, though, Brad, because like not yesterday, the day before, was the first time I've taken Freddie and dropped him off at school since I broke my back.
That's
So
great.
I can't drive at the moment, so my wife drove me right up to the front door. I got out my crutches and walked him to the front door, and that felt like a massive achievement for me on that day. And then the rest of the day, I was knackered, but I felt like I'd really achieved
Well, you got that
something,
one thing.
which
I
to
wouldn't say
most
that's
people, it's just getting out of bed.
I totally
but
get it.
I think that's something people take for granted.
Yes.
I think that's actually quite a big thing.
Oh, huge.
I don't think it's so much a little thing. And I know how you
But it's the
visualizing it as a
aspect.
little thing.
Yeah.
But if you put it in context, that's huge, and that's a massive win for you. That's really nice.
But in the context of it, he's right where it like someone who doesn't go through much of anything is going to look at that and be like, that's a Monday. But for someone like Tom or whatnot, it's a huge win.
No, I do get it. It's just, yeah, it's
But I think part of it as well is someone like me who's always been very independent and, don't like accepting help from people and want to do everything off, just having to get my wife to drive us up there. So just so I can walk him there, just accepting that and then just getting on and accepting that being able to walk him down into school and back is a good thing. It's a big win for me. And it's a positive thing. I think that's a good thing for me mentally as well as physically.
100%.
Absolutely. So where were we up to? So your time in the hospice. I'm interested in this. So I think I did about a week of work in a hospice many years ago when I was training to be a nurse. What 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 is a hospice like? I mean, I think for a lot of people, they're going to fill just the word will fill people with dread.
Yes.
But an awful lot of what I hear, it's not the case at all. So yeah, I'm interested
No, it's
for
not.
what your experience of the hospice
It's
was in the last
it's
few weeks.
it's funny you ask because I've actually I've done a video with them today. They've come down and interviewed me and my wife about this exact thing because they and we were in exactly the same boat. So I was admitted to hospital when my back completely gave out. I fell onto the floor and literally could not move. So I had to take an
Right.
ambulance. Because of the teams that are involved with me, the palliative care, Macmillan, they facilitated the move to the hospice, but based purely on a temporary stay for pain management and symptom control, which I knew nothing about. You just hear hospice and you think end of life, palliative care. Once you go in, you're never coming out unless you're in a bag. And if you'd have seen my wife's face, it were a picture. You could have literally picked her tongue up off the floor, rolled it up, and put it back in a jar because she was just like,
Right.
"Shit, we're not here yet, are we?" So we were both at that point thinking and fearing the worst because we just didn't know what to expect. The nurses then explained that it was just that it's a more relaxed environment. It's better for somebody like me who's younger with a young family visiting or just so relaxed and free and easy. Obviously, when you've got younger kids and visiting's 2 till 4 or 6 till 8, it doesn't work.
It's
You
a nightmare.
2 till 4
Absolute
is
nightmare.
school pick-up time, and 6 till 8 is tea time. So Charlotte were pulling her hair out, and it's not the nicest environment for young kids to come into in a busy hospital that's just carnage.
Not at all.
So the hospice, it was just so relaxed. I had my own private room with like an ensuite setup. Not that I particularly needed it because I wasn't moving around, but so it had a TV
That was just to
and
tease you.
everything. It was really just to say, if you could get up, you could go here.
Right.
But no, like the staff as well, just from a point of view of the staff and the management there as well, because it's a lot more relaxed environment than a full-on hectic hospital. They've got time to sit with you and talk to you and understand what's going on. So obviously, as I'd mentioned about the tumour spreading to my brain, I genuinely just felt like I had a bit of a cold. So I were playing it down to them for a couple of days, just saying, my head's a bit thick, I'm not right. But they were saying, but you're shying away from light. You've been doing this that you weren't doing yesterday. You've been doing this. And because they'd been able to spend so much time with me for the 3 weeks before, they were picking up on things that I wasn't even telling them. They'd just picked up on it from seeing how I was acting differently. And had said, we're a little bit concerned that there's something else going on here, so we're going to get you a scan. And within 2 hours, I was over the road, had a CT scan on my brain, and was back getting the results in the hospice, which you'll know, Dan, for definite over here. Getting a CT scan usually takes 2 months, so never mind getting the results and everything back within 2 hours. I was just shocked. And I think that's purely down to how the hospice, the staff have the time to chase things up, facilitate things, and just do their actual job and not be just like firefighting constantly.
That's
And obviously the thing about the video that I'd mentioned earlier that I've done today is just raise awareness because they don't get any funding from government. It's
Really?
all
No.
funding that they
No,
raise
it's
themselves,
it's yeah, it's
self-generated
terrible.
funding.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm actually this is I think I mentioned it on the last podcast. This is the 10K. I'm running it for Wakefield Hospice.
Good man.
So my wife and I have done a few fundraising bits for Wakefield Hospice because my wife worked at Pinderfields for 15 years. Pinderfields is our local hospital, which is attached to the hospice. Well, the hospice is over
It's
the
attached
road.
to it, yeah.
So we've done a few bits and
Oh, yeah.
bobs down the years for Wakefield Hospice, but I would encourage anyone in the UK, if you can support hospices, it's a fantastic cause. As Tom says, they don't have any central funding, and you know, as Tom's alluded to, they support people in a fantastic way. So if you can support your local hospices in any way possible.
Yeah. I genuinely can't speak highly enough about my time there and the staff.
It sounds
I've had
amazing.
some pretty horrendous experiences in hospitals over the last 2 years. I've had some average ones, but I've had some pretty horrendous ones. So
Well, it's the
I
system
can
looks so
compare to the
broken.
full spectrum.
Yeah.
I think the trouble with hospitals, and having been a patient and having worked in them for many years, is average is often the best outcome you can hope for.
Yeah, really is.
You know,
Yeah.
they're just not nice places to be, are they? Really?
Not in the current climate, definitely not.
No.
I think obviously, you know, they do fantastic work. They save our lives. Appreciate all of that, but sitting in a bay of with 5 other dudes and 2 of them have dementia and one of them is just shouting out all night.
Mhm.
The other one's trying to climb into bed with everyone else in the bay. You know, and then you go for all these procedures, getting tubes shoved in every orifice which is available. You get stabbed with needles.
Well, and everyone has a
It's
countering
just,
opinion. Like, that's one thing I always deal with when I'm in the hospital. It's like
yeah,
one person
it's
says
just,
one
but
thing, the next day another nurse comes in saying a different thing. Like, what? What's real?
yeah, I always worry about people who come out and say, "Yeah, I had a great time." It's just not.
Yeah.
They're not there for that. So, what's at present living with cancer? What does your average day look like? So, say you're not going for a procedure.
Good point.
It's just, and what's your average day as it stands right now?
So an average day for me now, I am fully retired. I've taken ill health retirement. Just because the prognosis is so poor, I wanted to make sure that I had enough time to spend as much time as possible with my family and focusing on my health. So I can focus all my energy on treatments and everything. So I took ill health, obviously taking a financial hit, and we're having to cut us cloth accordingly. But the amount of freedom and time it's given me back to be able to do the things like drop my kids off at school and
Yeah.
Right.
pick them up from school, and the bits and pieces that when I was working and I was busy working 8 till 6 o'clock every day, I just never got a chance to do. And I think it's those little things that now keep me grounded and in touch with what's going on more so than anything else, because
Right.
the one thing I'm really conscious of now is that time's precious and I want as many memories as possible for the boys, so they've got plenty of memories of me, not just the odd photograph of this and that. So
Right.
the general day is usually just get kids ready for school. Well, the wife does 90% of that. I just bark orders usually and sit there with my crutches at the moment. Get the kids ready for school and childminder. During the day, Charlotte only works part-time, so some of the days she'll be around to help me out. Other days I'm a bit more independent and have to make my own cups of tea and make my lunch and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I just potter around like an old man, really, to be truthful. More often
Okay.
than not, looking for something to fill some time. I've watched a lot of Netflix. I'm now
Yeah.
starting
Completed
to.
Netflix.
I think I'm 90% complete at the moment. So not quite there just yet. But there is only so much you can watch in a day without going stir crazy. So
Mm-hmm. Have you considered
I've even
starting any
found myself.
projects, like any little personal things to help get you through?
Not particularly. Dan will tell you that I've got a little bar in my back garden, which is where I'm sat
It,
now.
it is an
In
awesome
the
bar, it has to be said. I'm very jealous of it.
in the first lockdown in 2020, I built this as a
Okay.
cover for having some workspace at home. So I put a very small desk in and then filled 95% of the rest of it with bar paraphernalia. So there's always bits and pieces going on in here. I'm adding
Okay.
bits, but just from a physical health point of view, since my back, I've just taken my feet off. I bought myself a hot tub, so I spend at least an
Ooh.
hour and a half every day in the hot tub
Nice.
doing physio and rehab. Obviously,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's
That's
all for my health.
that's similar as the bar is for work, the hot tub is for physio.
Yeah, that's it.
Just
And you
nice
have to have a cold beer
justifications.
while you're in there as well. So you've got to
Absolutely.
keep the balance. You've got to keep
Right.
the temperature balance right. You can't be getting too warm.
No,
So
and you
yeah,
don't want to
man,
dehydrate either. It's important that you keep
exactly.
your electrolyte levels just in tip-top shape. So
Yeah.
yeah, and
But I think in general, what I would say is I don't live every day thinking cancer, 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 cancer. I
Right.
just get on
yeah,
with my days.
That's good.
It's not the only thing that's on my mind all day long. As much as I know somewhere further down the line this is going to beat me, I'm not
yeah,
at that point where that's going to be in my head all the time.
Right.
Obviously, when you get told it's moved to your brain and things, you have a bit of a oh shit, what's going on now moment.
Mhm.
I
And
think you're
I think
entitled at that point.
Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, and you know it does knock you for a little bit, and it takes a few days to get your head around that
Yep.
because you think, what more now? I've already got this, and then because it was only 3 weeks before that I was told that I'd been responding really well to treatment, and my main tumors
Yeah,
had shrunk, all my lymph nodes had shrunk, so I was like as good a news as we could possibly have got.
Hmm.
So you just feel like someone's just slammed that door shut and said, right, here's another one with a fire behind it that you've got to go through. So you do
Right.
have a bit of a panic, but me personally, it doesn't consume me every
That's good.
day. I get on with the only thing that sometimes frustrates me is just how much it's on the television. There's always
It
adverts or
is.
stories, which I seem to notice all the time now, which I probably
yeah.
wasn't as conscious of before.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you guys are saying with stuff to do with IBD, like once you start being involved in it, it just seems to be everywhere, doesn't it?
It does to a
You seem to
degree.
hear about it, like where you
Nothing.
wouldn't necessarily expect to hear it, and you hear in conversations or see things and think, oh yeah, it's a lot more commonplace than I
I
thought.
mean, yeah. So one that really struck me. I don't know if you saw it, but there was a documentary on Channel 4 a couple of weeks ago,
Still gotta
and
watch this.
it was very close to talking shit as the
Yeah.
title. And I was like,
It's know
the
your shit.
thieving
Yeah.
bastards.
I'm not saying that.
But obviously, it never occurred to me before. But now I'm tempted to sue Channel 4 for stealing our intellectual property.
I'll have to have a look for that. I'm not
So
saying that one. See if it's catch up.
you're talking about the the inevitability of having a bad day or so mentally. How much does it help having your family around? Does that help pull you out of these down moments?
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. Obviously, my wife's a massive support, but I think generally the kids do more good
Yeah.
than anyone because they're so oblivious and just get on with what's going
Yeah.
on. You know,
Right.
they will
They have
ask
no
some daft
respect for cultural
questions.
norms in this circumstance, do they? They just
No,
say,
that's it. You know,
"Dad, get up and play with my Paw Patrol or whatever."
exactly.
Wherever is the in thing with kids these days. Mine are a bit older than that, so
Yeah. So the eldest one, like I say, he knows a bit about what's going on. But if Charlotte says I've had a bad night, he'll come in and say morning and just say, come down when you're ready. And you just,
yeah,
I don't feel like I'm holding anyone up or, putting
Right.
anyone out. And
That's good.
the amount that it helps out as well,
Oh, that's good.
it's, it's almost a bit of a shame because you feel like he's growing up too soon. But like
Yeah.
anything I ask him to do, because my back's so bad, you're like, could you just grab us that for us, mate? And he's so willing to help out because he feels like he's making things easier for me.
These
And
tens of
that
things
just
do
cheers
that.
you up. Yeah,
Yeah, they.
but just seeing it cheers you up because you know that he just wants what's best
Mhm.
for me. You can't help but
Yeah,
smile.
I think kids at that age as well are generally quite keen to please.
Yeah.
So, I've just gone through the horrible teenage years. I'm not sure a teenage child would be quite so willing to help out. They'd see it as
No.
much more a affront on their affront
Well,
on
that's it.
them.
I've definitely gone to an extreme length to try and get out of the teenage years. I've got to admit that.
There is that, yeah.
I'm
I
sure
think
there's
it's
easier ways to have done it.
yeah, maybe so.
Oh.
So, taking the light-hearted approach to this question on the back of that, have you? Are you looking at the inevitability of what's to come? Have you thought about funeral planning? Is that something that the Macmillan nurses talked to you about, or is it something you and your wife have talked about, or is it something you want to put out of your mind?
Macmillan have asked some questions. When I was in the
Right.
hospice, I think I did think quite a bit about it because there was a number of conversations about do not resuscitate and those types of
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
which then gets you thinking about further things down the line. And obviously, they
And
were
you have the
explaining.
endless hours of just looking at nothing in a hospital as well,
Yeah,
which
Yeah.
isn't
exactly.
going to help.
Yeah, Netflix only stays on so long before your brain zones out to it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think it's inevitable that whether you do it individually, like when you sat on your own, or as a couple when you sat with your wife or husband or whatever, that you start talking about it. I have thought about funeral stuff. I've started planning stuff. I've got some songs together on a playlist for Charlotte
Yeah.
to say these are the types of things I think I would like to be played at my funeral.
Hmm.
I want something more upbeat than sad, and
Yeah.
and you'll probably remember anyway, Dan. But like my mum died when I was quite young. I was only
Yeah.
18 when my mum died,
Yeah.
and that was a similar thing. She was ill for a while, and she'd
Okay.
got some songs and stuff together to say, I don't want to have a boring, crappy funeral where everyone's in black and feeling miserable. Just celebrate my life.
Yeah. Have
And I
more of a
think,
party vibe and a
Hmm.
celebration rather
yeah,
than a mourning.
So,
yeah, and
do you
that's
use the word
exactly where I
wake?
want to be. Yeah,
Sorry.
Do you use the word wake over there?
Yeah, traditionally it's a very Irish thing and a very
Okay.
Irish Catholic thing, but I think it's become more in the lexicon of our language and the way we treat funerals in the last 10 or
I
20
was
years.
thinking of that as you're saying is like, for me, wake comes in to mind for that. It's more of a gathering of
yeah,
people rather than something more sad.
Well, I think
yeah,
if memory serves, the wake is the party after the funeral,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yep.
yeah.
So
Where you go for
it's
your
when
buffet and your sandwiches.
yeah, that's where you get your pineapple on little cocktail
Mhm.
sticks and basically people just get shit faced in the pub on Guinness and talk about stories endlessly, which is no bad
Yeah,
thing.
Well, that's
It's
what
a
I mean. It's
celebration of the person's life.
it's
Um,
yeah,
the happier part where you talk about the good parts. So that's
yeah, where you
why my
can
brain goes
reminisce.
to that.
Yeah,
yeah. And I think in terms of my situation, I know, and there's no pussyfooting around it. Within 10 years, it's going to happen to me unless something miraculous happens from a treatment point of view. So there's no point pretending that it's not going to happen further down the line. It won't do anyone any good. I won't be here, obviously, at that point, but I think Charlotte, it'd make everything a lot easier for Charlotte if I can at least say to her, this is the type of thing I want. So I'm not religious, so I
yeah,
don't want a big religious ceremony, just crematorium, blah, 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 blah. Just give her some bullet points to work to so that when the shit hits the fan, no pun intended, she's
oh,
not as
we love a
stressed,
good pun. You're
hopefully.
fine.
So, but I think in general, when you get told that you've got a life-limiting disease and that it's terminal, I think you, or especially somebody like me who's quite organised and quite self-sufficient, the first thing I wanted to do was make sure that everything was sorted for my family.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I'm not here, they can just carry on regardless. So like the ill health retirement, get my pension sorted and all that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
from a financial point of view, I've set up Google Drive folders that's got all the documents Charlotte will ever need for insurance and all this type of stuff. Because invariably, these are the things that you don't think about when you're just going
Yeah.
through life.
Yeah.
I organise everything in the house, bills and all that. I've always looked after the bank. So Charlotte's like, where do we even pay this from? How much is
Right.
this? Who's so it's just practice, but they keep you busy as well. As
Yeah.
much as it seems a bit morbid thinking about all of it, it keeps you busy and keeps you occupied and
Yep.
making sure that
Keeps your brain
everything's
going.
going to be ticked off. And I think it gives me a bit of comfort that when I'm not
Yeah.
here, I
Oh
know
yeah.
Charlotte's going to be able to pick things up and not be stressed and not have that extra pressure and stress trying to figure things out.
You've kind of done your job. Is the
Yeah,
feeling?
effectively.
You've
Yeah.
done the husband father thing of getting everything sorted.
I-
Just to go
Yeah.
back, you
Oh.
said it's talking about being a little morbid about getting all your ducks in a row. The thing is, life is limited. We're all going to die. So I don't think it's morbid in any way to think of things like that. I think
No, it's
I could do
helpful.
fairly well to actually just do that with my financial things now anyway, rather than just having a massive paper on the table that I scream and cry at the same time. And I
I
think as well, when it comes to funeral planning, especially once you settle down, get married, have kids, I think it's a good idea to talk about what you want at a funeral. Because
Yeah.
having seen, as we all have, we've had friends and family members who've died. Those people who were left behind from a funeral, they want to have the comfort in knowledge that they got it right. They want to
That's true.
feel that they've given the person the send off that they wanted and they deserved. So if you can sit down with, my wife's told me about 57 songs she wants at her funeral, but that's just because she likes to be the centre of attention. She will be listening, so I'll pay for that later. But I think it is a very good idea to have these discussions with your loved ones
Yeah.
while you're capable, because tomorrow you could get hit by a bus.
It kind of leads me
I think-
into. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say the only other thing that we've had to do at a fairly quick rate was sorting his wills and everything. Which
Right.
at 30 odd years old, we had wills, but they were very basic.
Mhm.
If I die, everything goes to you. If you within your will, when you properly sit down and do one with someone, you can have all these instructions in your will as well. So it's all
Yeah.
in one neat, tidy place. So I've learnt quite a bit from that side of it. That sometimes you might have to pay a little bit to make sure it's done properly, but
But being
having all these
done
things
is
in
right.
place will make things a lot easier for everyone else further down the line.
100%.
And likewise, in my position, it just gives me that peace of mind that I can just think, I know that's ticked off now. That's one
Right.
less thing I have to worry about. I can focus on treatment or,
Mm.
having
Yeah.
a day out or whatever and not think about it.
And
So
you're
that's
taking
your-
future stress off of your family.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your top tip. You're gonna die, so sort your shit out. So
Pretty much, yeah. I think so.
I think it's a very good top tip, to be honest. Brad, you were going to ask a question a moment or two ago.
Yeah, so Dan's probably learned this in our 6-7 months of knowing each other, but I am a very media centered guy. I take photos, I take videos. There's barely a moment where some device is not in my hand that I can capture a moment. Have you considered making videos for your kids for specific monumental moments in their life?
I think the short answer is yes. I've considered a number of things.
Mhm.
I've seen a few where people have written letters to their children, for key birthdays and events and milestones.
Yeah.
Seen videos. I'm probably on the other end of the spectrum to you in that, in terms of sharing and documenting things, I don't do an awful lot. I don't share much on social media. I don't really document much photos, videos, and things. So
Mhm.
I'm not sure that's necessarily the right route for me, because it would be obscure compared to what I do in normal day-to-day life, but
Right.
the writing of letters for key birthdays and milestones and things, I think might be something that I'm going to look into.
Okay.
Not just for the kids either, but maybe for Charlotte as well
Mhm.
and the wife and
Yeah.
stuff. Just have a box. We have got some like memory boxes for the boys where when we're doing things together, we can put them in an envelope and put them in these memory boxes so that they've
Right.
got a box of things that we've done to, which will have photos and things in, which again was a suggestion from Macmillan, and I think that'll be really good for the boys when
Mhm.
they get old.
Yeah.
No,
I
100%.
mean, they'll absolutely treasure it. Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of like sharing my journey, I mean, you two have probably seen it, but I'm not a big social media person, but I have taken a step to make sure I'm sharing what's going on with me,
Right.
both because I think it's an easy way of keeping everyone getting the same story and not getting Chinese whispers and
Yeah.
hearing things
Yeah.
from second and third and fourth hand. But likewise, I think it's also useful to draw attention to my situation and, you know, just signs and symptoms and things because,
Yeah.
as I said, the doctor said to me, I'm not in the age range of someone who gets bowel cancer.
Yeah.
And pretty much wrote it off. So I'm the exact proof that it doesn't discriminate. Yes,
Yeah.
the numbers might be low, but it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter. You could
It's
be 15.
that's such a thing that
The
like
symptoms are there.
irritates me that a doctor would say that. Like there are no I can't even say the words, but like nothing is so 100% like that. Like it's not just old folks who are getting bowel cancer. Fuck, like there's little children who get bowel cancer. Like
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
asinine, and we've been into the same conversation about stomas and stuff where all the materials are about older folks, and these are things that need to change in the medical system. Like
Definitely.
because then people like you, people like Dan, people like me, we come across these situations and we're like, we're young. We're just seeing pamphlets and everything with older folks. We're young in comparison to the people they're showing, Dan. Don't give me that face.
That's true. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just, not sure any of us fit into the young category. Just slightly not as archaic as some of the pamphlets that are given out.
Exactly. So it's always a frustration for me, and I'm glad to see you working to change that. People need to see.
Yeah, well, I almost feel like I've got a responsibility to share my story, even if just one person
That's it.
reads it and thinks, I'm going to go and get checked out just to be safe. I've had a few people
100%.
reach out to them. I know Dan had said similar when he was in hospital and posting what was going on with him. The amount of people who reach out to you and just say, I've been knackered for 3 weeks solid. I just put it down to having young kids. And that's where I was.
Mhm.
I had a young kid at home and I just thought, I'm just shattered all the time because we've got a kid who doesn't sleep very well.
Yeah.
But then then I have stomach cramps and this and that, and then you start adding it all together, a different picture emerges, and you just think, yeah,
Right.
granted, I might not be in the 55, 60, 65 bracket, but the other things are at least a warning of something. It probably won't be cancer in 99% of people of our age,
Mhm.
but what's the harm in getting checked out? If they're going to be checking for other things, why not check everything and just rule it out?
100%.
Yeah.
Because with cancer especially, time is of the essence.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the unfortunate thing with me, because I had very little symptoms. It was already well advanced when they found it, so there's no turning the clock back for me. But somebody else might get lucky enough to get it before it's gone too far.
Right. That's a good point.
So I think we're probably heading towards the end of our chat. We seem to have covered an awful lot. There's just a couple of things to cover off. So I know your sister is doing something ridiculous in your name. Do you want to give her a shout out for the self-harm she's inflicting upon herself?
Yeah, so my little sister, who was a couple of years younger than me, after seeing me a few times post chemo and when I was really at my lowest, in terms of health wise anyway, maybe not mood, after a few glasses of wine, I dare add, signed herself up to run the London Marathon when she's never run a marathon in her life. I think she once did a half marathon about 10, 15 years ago. So she signed up to raise awareness of Bowel Cancer UK. So she
Yep.
signed up via the Charity Direct, which means she's got to raise a minimum level of funding to get the place, which I think she's pretty much there. She's done pretty well, but yeah, she's managed to sign herself up to London Marathon, get a place, and is now trudging along, regrettably in the rain and dark.
I am going
So
to.
we've
Sorry, Dan. Just let me.
Go on,
I'm
brother.
going to
I think
do a
we
little.
should say the
Yeah,
same thing.
I'm going to do a little production speak here. For those listening, you can find a link to the charity in the podcast description, and for those watching, it should be on your screen, one of these places.
But I'd be absolutely fine if anyone can, even just a couple of pound. It's not just for my sister; it's for the charity in general and
Yeah.
bowel disease in general. I think it's absolutely amazing what they are doing, and hopefully, the more money they can raise, the less people will be in my situation and will be found earlier.
100%.
Treatment will be better.
Absolutely.
I was going to, sorry, I cut Dan off again. I'm going to change topics in a moment. I was going to say, you mentioned she hasn't run a marathon. And I was like, oh, has she been preparing? And I can even see on the page here that she logs her runs. So I can see she's preparing to get ready for this, which is great to see.
I think, they've just recently, last week, actually moved house. So I think she's been getting stressed about the moving house. But
that's
in
understandable.
the preparations, she'd realised that I think she'd put herself on more of an advanced training plan originally.
Oh, really?
She was talking to another friend who's doing the marathon, who's only doing half the distances that she's currently doing.
So
I think she's feeling like she's actually in a good place.
Yeah.
She's ahead of where she needs to be. So hopefully the confidence doesn't come back and bite her and she doesn't think she can put her feet up now until April.
There's a theme at London Marathon where people dress up. Is she dressing up like a diseased colon to run the marathon?
I was hoping at the very least she'd go as an emoji turd. I think that's the least she could do.
Brilliant. Yeah.
I like that.
I am going to put that forward. I'll buy her the outfit after.
I think we can add some peer pressure. You know, it's been on that podcast now, so it has to happen.
I think running 26 miles is enough, though. To be fair, so I wouldn't want.
I think it's fucking insane.
It's amazing.
But, amazing. Sorry, I misspoke. Amazing, not fucking insane. It's fucking insane.
It's both. It's definitely both of those.
It's insane for a good cause. That's what it is.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, anyone has
I don't know if you
spare
put it on your
change?
list, Dan. I don't know if we can share this, but I thought I'd mention it as well. So another friend who used to play rugby, Scott Cramner.
Yeah, Scott has been in touch. Yeah.
He's put himself forward to do a half Ironman as well to raise some money. So
very nice.
Is it half a marathon? I can't remember. 20K swim or something ridiculous.
Something ridiculous.
Well, the Ironmans are harder, aren't they?
Yeah. He's doing ice baths for training and up at 5 a.m. for runs for 17 hours or something daft. I mean, the guy is super fit anyway. He's done some pretty impressive things in the past, but he did mention putting our podcast symbol on his triathlon suit.
On his suit.
So, So
I'll have to figure that one out.
We should probably get a link for Scott's adventures as well. We'll
have it covered.
Put that on the link below as well.
We'll also cover. I apologize. I'm so bad with names. The Hospice charity. I want to also link that. Yeah. So be sure to look in the description below, and we'll have all of those links.
Yeah.
So
as I mentioned in the video that I did earlier, is it worth me sharing with you if I get a link to the video that they've done with me?
Yes, please. Absolutely, I would love to share that.
Because that'll have some of the same sort of stories, but also it'll be more direct at what the Hospice do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
no, I'd love to share that.
Okay, guys, I think we should wrap up. So what we normally do to finish up, Tom, is we generally ask what would be your message to your younger self. Now, given that cancer obviously is a chronic illness, but we've already talked about your earlier symptoms and you know what was missed by doctors and how you've got to where you are. So rather than talk in terms of health, what would be a message you would give to your younger self as a top tip just for life?
I would say the main thing is make as many memories as you possibly can with those who you want to make memories with, your loved ones, your family, your friend, your close friends, and don't leave it until you're in a position where you're time limited to do that.
I like that. That's a very good
That's a
message.
beautiful, beautiful sentiment to end on.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tom, thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed chatting shit with us, and we'll hope to see you soon.
Yeah, no,
Thanks.
it's been great,
That's-
guys. I'm sure we'll do it again at some point.
I would love to.
Absolutely.
Until next time.
Brad and Dan talk shite.
What an absolute pleasure that was, spending an hour chatting with Tom.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy just blows me away with his positivity.
I've gone through a lot, but I can't say that even with my positivity that going through something like that, I would be able to stay that strong. Like,
No,
he's an inspiration for sure.
absolutely. An absolute hero. I just, every time I talk to the guy, I'm just absolutely staggered by how positive he is. So, Tom was actually scheduled to be our second episode.
Yeah.
And then texted me the morning of the planned record and said, this is the issue you're going to have with dealing with chronic ill people. I'm in hospital.
Yeah.
And that was his response to having a broken back.
Yeah.
To text me and make a joke. I just and yeah, I'm just I think I'm a little shell shocked by that conversation. I think everything
Very
we
much
covered,
so.
and how frank and honest he is, and talking about his kids and funeral planning, and I'm just
I think for me that was a big one as I'm like on that train to becoming a new dad,
Yeah.
thinking about that type
Yeah.
of stuff. It hit hard.
yeah. Well, it's every parent to be and parents' worst. Well, possibly not worst nightmare. The worst
No.
nightmare is probably your kids having
Yeah.
cancer, but
But it's up there. Having to leave your
Yeah.
kids alone is a scary thought.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and the bravery of the man to
Oh, 100%.
go from that. And I mean, some absolute belting pearls of wisdom out there in that episode as well.
Mhm.
So sort your financial shit out.
Oh,
if something
100%.
were to happen to you,
I didn't want to talk about it then, but it made me think about an article I read in the newspaper last year talking about families having to deal with older loved ones passing away and how they're just left with like houses full of junk. And
Yeah.
it made me think about how we should try to get a jump start on things like that, and which rolls into, like Tom says, thinking about finances, thinking about arrangements, thinking about like all these little things, because you don't want to leave that. It's so much stress on someone when you've passed.
Also delete your browser history. Which probably a top tip as well.
That's for your best friend.
Yeah.
You send the best friend in.
Best friend is in for the laptop.
Yeah.
What was the pearl of wisdom at the end? Oh, the making memories thing. I mean, that's a beautiful sentiment.
It's honestly something everyone should live by.
Yeah.
Take the time to make the memories.
Yeah. So I think we've waffled on quite enough. I mean, the star of the show was Tom, so
100%.
we don't need to do any real legwork in this podcast.
I,
So guys,
before
please.
one last thing, I
sorry.
apologize. I just wanted to say before we wrap up, I just want to remind everyone that we will have links to Tom's sister's charity, the Hospice charity, and I believe it is your friend or your guys' friend who's doing
We both know him.
Okay,
Yeah,
so a friend of you both. All those links will be in the audio description below. If you're watching the video version, it will also be in the description, but you'll probably find some handy links on the video.
Yep, and if you want to get in touch about anything at all, you can catch us on Twitter or you can email us. We will put those links below as well. It's going to be a hefty link with this this episode.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for tuning in, guys.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
See you next time.
There is this guy from Canada called Brad, and a guy from Yorkshire, he's called Dan. They got together when the battles tried to kill them, and made this podcast to talk about their illness. Brad and Dan are talking shit, Brad and Dan are talking shit, yes, Brad and Dan are talking shit to you and you and you.